Nowadays, when talking about the German armed forces of the Second World War, the first vehicles that come to mind for most people are the well-known designs such as the Tiger or the Panther tanks. While their combat effectiveness is difficult to dispute, these were never built in enough numbers to satisfy German war demands. The small and cheap Sturmgeschütz III would become the most widely produced tracked vehicle in the German armored arsenal. Its entry into service in 1940 was rather modest, mostly due to the small number of vehicles available at that time, but this was something that would change dramatically in the war's later years. But before we continue with our look at the overlooked first version of the StuG III, a word about today's sponsor, Yahaha. This is a new, user-generated content creation platform for 3D multiplayer interactive experiences, and anyone can create and publish their virtual experiences without coding experience or server knowledge. Simply use the cool features, components, and smart assets in Yahaha Studio to make your dream games and experiences. I wonder if anyone made a tank museum yet. Making your own experiences is easy thanks to the already existing templates, thousands of 3D models, and behaviors that are already available for free, and the friendly interface, which even code noobs such as ourselves can use. Testing and playing is then very easy as well, and you can then share your creations with your friends or the wider community. Yahaha also hosts regular live sessions for the community to help creators enhance their metaverse building skills, so you can find them on Twitch or YouTube. If you want to check out Yahaha, you can click the link in the description to try it out for free. And seriously, let us know if any of you make a tank museum. During the Great War, the Western Front was bogged down in trench warfare, where fast movement was limited due to the terrain and fortified defenses. In order to break the stalemate, the Germans began deploying stormtroopers. These were infantry units that put great emphasis on speed and sudden attacks in order to overwhelm the enemy's defensive line. In order to support them, light-towed artillery was used. The close fire support was a welcome addition during an assault, destroying enemy targets like machine gun emplacements and fortified positions. However, the use of the artillery in this role was hampered by the crews being exposed to enemy return fire and the guns being too cumbersome to move over rough terrain. After the war, German army military officials were quite aware that failing to provide the infantry with adequate close-range fire support would lead to high losses during attacks on enemy entrenched positions. Mobile artillery was seen as a solution to this problem. In 1927, a self-propelled vehicle armed with a 77mm gun mounted on an experimental Hanomag tracked tractor was in development, but the project was terminated due to a lack of funds. Nevertheless, this concept was not completely abandoned, and work on it re-emerged in the early 1930s. This was mainly thanks to Erich von Manstein. He argued for the introduction of a highly mobile, well-protected, and well-armed self-propelled artillery gun. Such vehicles were meant to provide the infantry with mobile close-fire support during combat operations. Thanks to the self-propelled chassis, these could be quickly redeployed to respond to any new threat. This self-propelled artillery gun was to be an organic part of standard infantry divisions. While initially opposed by some elements of the German army, the project received a green light when it was approved by Oberfeldhaber des Heeres Generaloberst Werner von Fritsch in 1935. The project was to be carried out under the supervision of Colonel Walter Model. The whole project started at a very slow pace, and it took a year for things to finally get going. While the first steps in the creation of such a vehicle were underway, there was a disagreement between the different army branches, including artillery, infantry, and armor, about this project. While the value of such a vehicle was greatly praised by both infantry and artillery units, military circles that were advocating for the use of tanks were less enthusiastic. The main issue that arose was the question of what was the difference between a tank that could fulfill the same role and the proposed self-propelled artillery gun. While the tank force was seen as the main offensive formation, the infantry was meant to follow up and destroy the remaining isolated enemy forces. On the other hand, the infantry saw the tanks as support weapons and would request that part of the tanks be left behind to provide close support. This, in turn, would weaken the tank formations, robbing them of their numbers and firepower. The tanks were an offensive weapon that relied on speed and mobility to attack less defended positions. Fortified targets could not be taken by tanks alone. and they had to be accompanied by infantry. The assault vehicles, on the other hand, thanks to their mobility, armor, and firepower, could easily support the infantry. It was not a weapon to be used en masse, but instead to be used in smaller numbers as needed. Other nations, like France and later Great Britain, advocated for the main use of tanks as primarily infantry support weapons, with special designs for cavalry or cruiser work. In August 1936, this was also discussed by the German General Staff of the Army, but the idea was quickly discarded. They argued that for tanks to fulfill this role, tank armor had to be constantly upgraded to keep up with the development of anti-tank weapons. Adding additional armor would cause the tank to lose its mobility and its tactical offensive advantages. The generals from the panzer divisions were against this project. To them, introducing a new vehicle would put enormous stress on the overburdened German production industry. In the end, it was decided that the artillery branch would be responsible for training and developing tactics for this vehicle. At the end of March 1940, this vehicle was officially designated as Gepanzerte Selbstfahrerfette für Sturmgeschütz 75mm Kanon. The first series of this vehicle received the Ausf.A designation. This vehicle is generally best known under the much shorter StuG III Ausf.A name. In October 1939, the Waffenamt issued a production order for 280 vehicles. This included 30 vehicles of the Ausf.A version and 250 of the second series. For the production of the StuG III Ausf.A, several companies were included. The production of the gun and their mounting was carried out by Krupp from Essen. Brandenburg Eisenwerke, together with a couple of smaller firms, were responsible for providing the necessary armored parts and components. The guns and armored components, once available, were transported to Daimler-Benz for final assembly. The StuG III Ausf.A was built mostly using Panzer III Ausf.F chassis. The suspension consisted of 6 road wheels suspended using torsion bars. In addition, there was a front drive sprocket, rear idler, and 3 return rollers. The StuG III Ausf.A was equipped with a somewhat overly complicated semi-automatic transmission. In theory, with this transmission, the StuG III Ausf.A could reach speeds of up to 70 km per hour. In reality, it proved to be ineffective, difficult to produce, and prone to frequent breakdowns. The StuG Ausf.A introduced a new improved driver protective visor. When the visor was closed, the driver would use a binocular periscope to see through 2 small round ports located just above the visor. What appears to be doors on the StuG III Ausf.A's sides were actually angled plates that served as spaced armor. On the left superstructure side, a box-shaped armored extension was used to store the radio receiver. The most notable feature of the StuG III Ausf.A was the large sight tunnel placed above the driver's position. It led to the gunner's optics, which aimed the gun. This installation proved to be flawed in design and would later be abandoned. The StuG III Ausf.A was well protected for its time, with the front armor plates being 50 mm thick. The sides and the rear were 30 mm thick. The main armament consisted of a 7.5 cm Sturmkanon 37 L24 semi-automatic gun. This meant that, after a round was fired, it was automatically ejected, enabling the loader to insert a new round. While it was primarily designed to engage fortified positions using a 7.5 cm high-explosive round, it was also fairly good for engaging enemy armor. This fact is often overshadowed by its close support role. Before the war, the Germans were aware of the new French tank designs. When developing the 7.5 cm gun, they also introduced armor-piercing ammunition, capable of piercing around 39 mm of armor at a distance of 500 meters. The crew of this vehicle consisted of 4 men: the commander, driver, loader, and gunner. While the loader was positioned to the right of the gun, the remaining crew was placed opposite of him. The initial unit organization for these vehicles was quite simple, as it was limited by the available numbers. 6 vehicles were used to form a Sturmartillerie battery. These were divided into 3 StuG, each equipped with only 2 vehicles. As more StuG IIIs became available, the unit strength was increased into an Abteilung strength of 18 vehicles. These battalions were divided into 3 batteries, each 6 vehicles strong. The Artillery Lehr Regiment stationed at Jüterbog was chosen to train the StuG crews. The whole training process was carried out in secrecy. The StuG crews were all volunteers from artillery regiments. The initial personnel consisted of 90 non-commissioned officers and 250 men. There is an interesting story regarding a Soviet Army delegation that, while visiting Yuribog, unintentionally ran into a StuG III. They noticed the new vehicles and immediately took pictures of them. The German Army officials present felt that they had to do something to prevent the pictures from reaching the USSR. They invited the delegation to visit Berlin. As the Soviet delegation was on their way to see the new aircraft at the Berlin Tempelhof Airport, they walked through the corridor where a powerful X-ray gun was secretly placed. The Soviet delegation was quite surprised when they later opened the films and saw that they were completely destroyed by the X-rays. Prior to the Western campaigns of 1940, the available StuGs were distributed to 4 batteries: the 640th, 659th, 660th, and 665th. These were to be attached to various infantry divisions depending on the combat needs. The 666th and 667th batteries were formed using the StuG III Ausf.A/B hybrids. The remaining StuG III Ausf.As were used to equip a newly created SS assault battery for the Liebstendorfer SS Adolf Hitler division. When the German attack came on the 10th of May 1940, the 640th battery was the first to see action. It was attached to the Großdeutschland regiment. Unfortunately, due to the limited number of StuG III Ausf.As used during the Western campaign, not much is documented about their combat use by the Germans. The StuG IIIs from the 640th battery participated in the defense of German-held positions at Buisson Ridge. On the 14th of May, the French were trying to dislodge elements of the 19th Panzer Corps. The French attacked with FCM-36 tanks, which proved difficult to destroy using the 3.7 cm anti-tank guns. The StuG III Ausf.As, together with 88mm armed 12-ton half-tracks, helped to turn the tide. In a report from the 660th Battery after this campaign, the following was noted: the French light tanks were invulnerable to the 2-cm guns, but lost their turrets after being hit by our Stürmer. We felt safe in our Sturmgeschütz, and an after-action check at Givry-en-Argonne showed that our front plate had received 13 hits, but not one penetrated our armor. Only one StuG III Ausf.A was reported to be lost, but it was recovered and repaired. The performance of the StuG III in France was a huge success, and the Army officials demanded the production of the newer version be increased. Following the completion of the Western campaign, some batteries were used extensively in the preparation for Operation Sea Lion, which never came. 5 of these batteries would be attached to Army Group North during the early phases of the Barbarossa Offensive in 1941. This concludes our look at the German StuG III Ausf.A. What do you think about this new vehicle developed by the Germans? Would you like to learn more about assault guns and their development? Let us know in the comments. If you haven't already, consider becoming a subscriber so you don't miss a single video. If you want to contribute more directly, consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. The money comes back to you in the form of bigger and better videos. Until next time, keep us in your sights.